Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I think you guys are going to like this one. It's a little bit different. I have invited the newly elected Thurston County Sheriff, Derek Sanders, up to Snohomish County just to have a conversation about anything and everything. There's nothing off the table. That's what these podcasts are pretty cool to use for. And so welcome up to Snohomish County, Sheriff Sanders. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me, Adam.
Thanks for making the drive today. And I'll warn the community, we both can talk. This might be a longer episode than we're used to in Snohomish County, but man, public safety is a topic everywhere that we go in the state of Washington. It's not dying down. It's getting more and more and more heavy as far as the conversation goes. But anyway, I want to start with you a little bit on the personal side, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So newly elected, I know you were running a campaign last year. Yeah. You got elected. What the heck is going on in Thurston County?
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah. My campaign was pretty straightforward. Improve staffing, improve transparency with our community, and reduce crime. And that caught on pretty quick. It was something that people could relate with. And youth kept coming up in my campaign over and over. He's too young, he's too inexperienced. And the cool thing has just been like proving people wrong about that. Because I was dead set. I knew like in my heart that you can have someone take a young leadership role as long as they surround themselves with truly qualified people. And so the employees have bought into the system because they saw all of my picks were internal. And they saw those lieutenants, and all three of my chiefs that I selected were lieutenants with the sheriff's office, which to me, I just found those leaders, and they were young enough to still have the energy and be engaged, but they had that experience, 2 decades worth of experience to help lead. So
you can tell me to be quiet if you want. So how old are you?
I'm 29.
How long you been in cop work?
Well, I started as a CSO, like a little transport unit with Lacey PD at 19, and then spent 2 years there, and then 6 years with Thurston County. So I've got 7 years of commissioned experience.
Yeah, so that's a very unique path.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And I skipped a lot of.
Oh, well, I did too. That's what we talked before.
Yeah.
We have similar. They're not exactly the same, but similar. I definitely don't get the youth argument like you do. I don't get that question very much because I'm an older guy. That's okay. But I came from the world of. I went from graveyard patrol sergeant to this job as a learning curve.
Yeah.
And you as well come from the patrol side of the house.
Graveyard.
And now you run a jail.
I do.
I did the same thing, never having worked in a jail. So it's been, well, we're 3 years in now. You're a few months in. So I really dove into the jail stuff. But it's a complicated thing to run a jail in 2023 in the state of Washington, let me tell you.
Yeah, and it's unique, too, because the patrol side is what everyone sees. It's the outward-facing part of the department. And that's where I'm experienced is the patrol side, but you realize once you get elected, that's like 15% of the actual sheriff's office. The bulk of the work does happen in the jail. Yep. That's where the most amount of the money and the budget is spent. That's where the largest amount of employees are. There's a lot of learning to do.
What made you run?
Ooh, man. Well, there was just a lot of internal issues that I felt at the sheriff's office. I was a deputy working graveyard. And there was just a number of things, right? I mean, we had a serious retention problem. Obviously, all the laws changed in Washington State. That hit sheriff's offices harder than it hit cities because we get paid less. We relied more on doing good police work. Most of the sheriff's office I know, they have less restrictive pursuit policies because we're out in the middle of nowhere. We can chase more cars. That all went away. And what I saw was just a lack of response in that, right? Like, some of the comments that were just made down through the chain of command were just, it's not that bad. Get over it. Things change. And we're like, listen, this isn't your old school back in the day, one minor little change. Like the changes that occurred in 2021 were landscape changes. I mean, they changed everything about the foundation of police work. We had no answers to anything. And, to just hear that it's not that bad, that lit a little fire inside of me. And then we had 15 deputies leave in 1 year. Oh, wow. And you're talking about a patrol division that's only got 59 fully staffed. So that's almost a third of your patrol division. And once again, a lack of response to that. So, I actually had no intentions of running. I started reaching out to people. Hey, would you be interested in running? I don't even care if you win. Just challenge. Mm-hmm. I just want to challenge. I want to see some competitive spirit, and I want to see that competition that breeds excellence. Give me something. And everyone's like, I'm not doing it, but you should. And that's where I reached out to my bureau chief, Carla Carter. I'm like, you are like an eccentric female. You're a strong leader. Run for sheriff. And she's like, okay. And 2 days later, she's like, I'm not doing it. I'm endorsing you. And I'm like, I see how it is. Now I kind of get an idea of why, right? Like there's a lot of work that goes into it, but I had no intentions of running or winning. Even after I declared, it was just to bring some conversation, but the conversation caught on fire.
Yeah. Be careful what you ask for. I guess.
I know. I've always wondered, like they don't do any psychological testing for elected officials, and they should probably start. That should probably be the first one, because knowing what I know now, like you got to be crazy to volunteer for this.
Yeah, we might be in trouble in the state of Washington if we did that.
I know.
Or it could be better off.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't
It
know.
could be
It's
either
tough
or.
to say.
Okay, so public safety, you already mentioned a bunch. There's so many different angles we could go down.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about public safety in the state of Washington. We're kind of seeing, we just had an Everett police officer shot yesterday, the day before. He's going to make it, so that's good news, But that really, all day yesterday, I was driving around, I was out in the community, and just that sinking feeling. It's like something's off, man. I mean, I've been doing this 27 years, man, and I've never seen anything like, whether it's the legislation that was passed, it's just the climate for public safety in the state of Washington. Are you seeing the same thing in Thurston County?
Oh yeah, it's bad. One of the things that when I took over, in the last 3.5 months, we've had 10 SWAT callouts. That is like unprecedented.
That's a lot.
We average 10 a year.
Yeah.
And we just had 10 in 3 months. We had an active shootout between a suspect and our SWAT team. The only thing that kept people safe was our armored vehicle. The State Patrol had a bear out there. They got shot at. And so we're just seeing like this escalation, and we're not changing. We haven't changed our practices with our SWAT team. Like we're still going through the same checklist, but people are just checking out at those automatic like SWAT mandatory callouts. And that's scary to me, because when you start checking those boxes and, violent felon, known to shoot at law enforcement, committed a violent crime, and you start going through, like, we know where a lot of these incidents are going to end. So we've seen the increase in SWAT callouts. A lot of them are over drugs. So we've seen the basic legalization of narcotics. But what's frustrating is it's kind of the same thing with marijuana. And I was totally a proponent of legalizing marijuana, but even though we legalized it, we're still seeing shootouts and killings over a narcotic, a drug that's legal. And so that's the frustrating part, is not seeing that relief there. And same thing with car chases. We're seeing the impacts of that.
We'll get to that.
That's
Trust
a big
me.
topic. But yeah, just in general, I think the public safety thing is a huge topic. And even if the statistics don't come back for 2022 and show an explosion, I think that just the general sentiment is that people don't feel safe. I mean, I hear that everywhere I go. And so it'll be interesting to see. The general sentiment is that things are getting worse and people don't feel safe. I'll be interested to see how the statistics align with that.
So one of the things as elected sheriffs, people look to us when they see a rise in violent crime. And I think I have a decent answer for it, because we're out there working our tails off under unprecedented times. Yeah. And we're still out there doing both answering 911 calls, reactive, and we're pretty proactive up here. I've tried to support that to the best of my ability. Anyway, are there any answers out there? What are the reasons? I mean, I'm assuming that you guys are working your tails off in Thurston County the same we are up here. Yeah. What is it?
Well, we've definitely been hammering it out. I was a pretty proactive deputy. Yeah. Like that was my whole thing. I liked the things that I could handle right then. Like I wanted to find the bank robber and then capture him and then close that case up immediately. So that was my kind of thing. So we had some leeway for us, just because the prior administration had some more restrictive policies. So like I opened the door for DUI pursuits for our deputies. And oddly enough, our DUI arrests have gone up exponentially and our traffic stops have gone up exponentially. It's not a secret. If you give the deputies tools to do their job, they'll use them and they'll go out and do that stuff. We just got to a point when I was running for sheriff, it was pretty common that if there was a break in time, deputies would just sit at the station and do nothing. They just needed like a break from everything. Yeah. That didn't happen very often though, because our minimum staffing, we've got 7 deputies for 150,000 people working at any given time. That's our minimum staffing. So they're busy. I mean, they're getting their butt kicked every single night. And same thing in corrections, right? Like our corrections overtime and our patrol overtime are just through the roof. They're trying the best they can. And as a sheriff, I run a very active social media page, and I get a lot of messages like, I called to report a vandalism report and I got a call back 6 hours later. And I'm like, the best thing I can do is try to explain to people, like, we have to prioritize the domestic violence, the robberies, the shootings in the parks. I mean, just the last 2 weeks, like our detectives are tapped. There is no extra room right now for all these things that are going on. So we're just seeing a lot going on in Thurston County, and I'm so fortunate I get to inherit it like right at the beginning. So.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you're what, 3 months in?
Yeah, 3 months in.
Man.
I mean, we've had everything. We've had fatal overdoses at the jail. a sex offender house being installed in remote Thurston County, a legislative session that is like imperative to our operations. We've had a 2-year-old overdose on fentanyl that they got from their parents. We've had a robbery shooting, rolling shootout in our park. Like, this is not normal for Thurston County.
Yeah.
We are a property crime county historically.
Yeah.
And now we feel like we're trailing Pierce now, that we're just looking up north and seeing how our future is going to be. And, Pierce County is the Wild West. And,
wow.
And we're really trying to suppress that, but
okay,
man, we need some help.
Okay, so you mentioned police pursuits.
Yeah.
That's kind of near and dear to my heart. We're kind of, I would say, middle of the road up here is that I don't think we should chase anything and everything all day long, especially in a very populated county like Snohomish County. But like you mentioned, on graveyard shift in the middle of the night, someone steals a car and we find it, I think the deputy sheriff should at least have the opportunity to hold that person accountable. But then the state got involved in our business. They kind of shut all that down. What are you seeing in Thurston County? I've been pretty vocal with the community in Snohomish County about where I stand on this. I wish they just get out of our business. I don't think that's going to happen. I hope they tweak the law a little bit to where we have some more authority. But is that an issue in Thurston County, people driving away and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. Exponential increase in people fleeing traffic stops. There's a huge misconception too, and it's a narrative I've been trying to beat down since I got into office, is that there's other ways to capture them, and I just want to bring every single person who says that on a ride along, and you tell me how to go capture that person. They've got 5% window tint on their car. They took the plates off the car, or the car's stolen, so we already know who owns it. Yeah. And they just grabbed all the merchandise they could at Marshall's, and they got into their stolen car and drove away, and they got a COVID mask on. So if you can explain to me where the resources are and where the clues are to identify that person, we can't treat every single auto theft fleeing suspect as a homicide investigation where we donate 3 detectives to the case and identify that person and do geofence warrants, and the resources aren't there. So I'm a huge proponent of car chases. I chased a lot of cars as in my time as a deputy sheriff, but I also terminated a lot of pursuits. I canceled a lot of them that were just like, this is a stolen car and it's 2:00 in the day on Martin Way. Like, it's just not worth it. The discretion, the 2 best people in the entire planet to determine when and where a police pursuit should take place is the deputy who's pursuing the vehicle and the on-duty sergeant. Those are the 2 people. Like, even as the sheriff, that's not really my place. Yeah. It is the on-duty sergeant and the deputy who are sharing information back and forth about the location, the speeds, the roadway conditions, the traffic, the severity of the crime. Those are the 2 people on this planet that should have a say in whether or not a car is chased. I've chased no turn signals all the way into Tacoma because it was 2:00 in the morning, and I've terminated on robbery suspects because it was in downtown Olympia. It's about giving that discretion back. What's killing us as a state right now is the flat out fact that criminals know that there will not be a chase no matter what. Yep. That is what has increased the likelihood of cars taking off from us.
You just can't tell the crooks ahead of time, give them an entire list of crimes that we cannot chase them for, and then people are shocked when crime goes up.
This is just a checklist. Well, if it's just a shoplift and it's a stolen car, I mean, you can't chase me.
And now we're seeing that. Yeah. What I tell people all the time is, I get that question a lot in the community, is you don't need to be a police executive or an elected sheriff to figure some of this stuff out.
You don't.
You just don't.
No.
I mean, some of it's common sense stuff.
On my 4th day in office, I was just, doing my little administrative tasks in my Class A uniform, and Tumwater had a disturbance with a stolen vehicle and a possible kidnapping. And then I went downtown Olympia, and there was a car that this car is driving the wrong way through a roundabout. And so I'm like, well, we're going to pursue this thing for a DUI, because no one's even chasing him at this point. He's just driving really poorly. And as he passed me, he actually stopped and rolled the window down and said, "You can't chase me," and flipped me off and got on the freeway.
Oh my gosh.
That's the kind of that's the brazen mentality that we're dealing with. It's a very emboldened state for criminals. And so, needless to say, we pursued him and caught him. But there are situations where that's occurring, and we're like, well, you're right. Turn the lights off and drive the other way. And then, we get calls from people all the time, like, you guys aren't going to do anything about this? And I'm like, well, here's the RCW. Yeah, exactly. And people's jaw hit the floor when you tell them some of the stuff that's passed. Some people in our community just still don't know, right? People are busy with their families, raising kids, going to sports. Yeah, they don't have time.
They don't pay attention to this stuff day in and day out.
Until they become a victim and they want to, now they're interested. Now their attention is here. Like, what are you doing about my stolen car? While we're waving to it as it drives by.
I think people have had it, though. I do. I don't care what county you're in. I think people have had it.
I think so too. We need a balanced pursuit law,
Just
right?
balanced.
Like, it just needs to be balanced. Like, this isn't a cowboy state. Nope. We're not going out and doing cowboy stuff, but there definitely needs to be some balance to it.
All right, so accountability. I talk about it a lot up here, booking people. That's what we do. That's kind of our business day in and day out. Early on in my administration, it was kind of unpopular, 2020, 2021, to talk about that. I kind of stayed true. That's kind of one of the things I ran on back in 2019. So then I'm running this year, and I'm talking about the jail way more than I ever thought I would be. But I'm proud of what we've been able to do in Snohomish County. We've kept our jail open for the most part, other than the initial stages of COVID. But talk about what Thurston County is going through with jail restrictions. I mean, we say it because we live and breathe this stuff every single day. But explain it to like the community about what's that mean? Can you book anyone you want in the Thurston County Jail if they've committed a crime? What's going on with that?
No. So in 2020, COVID hit, and no one knew what was going on. And so our jail is actually a relatively newer jail, and it's an open dorm style jail. So the model is that one corrections deputy sits in a dorm that's got anywhere from 40 to 60 people or so, and there's direct supervision, which is great. We have natural sunlight in the jail. Like, it isn't just a clinking shut, old school jail where we just leave people in cells. That being said, it was about the worst design in the world for COVID, right? Instead of having individual cells for people to stay in, now you've got 40 to 60 people in a room all breathing on each other. Yeah. So what ended up happening is our public health officer came down and said, listen, we're going to tell you who you can and can't book. That's not their job. But we're going to tell you how many people can be in your jail at one time. We're also going to tell you how many people can come into the jail and how long they have to be quarantined for. So the problem that we have at Thurston County Jail is a lack of individual cells, and as a result, we can only take so many people in at one time, and they have to have a 72-hour mandatory quarantine period. They get COVID tested, 72 hours, then they go into the dorm. A couple issues with that. Most of the people that get booked in the jail don't stay.
Right.
So you have a very small area to actually take people and get them through the process, a DUI, right? They're going to get out the next day and have their court appearances later, but you've got to store that person somewhere for the 18 hours that they're waiting. Well, now that's taking up a spot for someone who might stay in the jail for a little bit longer, a robbery suspect who's going to have bail. They're all falling into the same 10 cells or whatever it is, So the issue that we're having is we have that mandatory minimum, and we also have a maximum capacity at how many people we can have in these dorms. So what we had to do, what the prior administration had to do, was go through and draw a line somewhere and say everything below this line, not a bookable offense now. It's just a referral. You're talking about burglary not being a bookable offense in Thurston County Jail up until last year. Residential burglary was allowed, and then up until when I became elected, burglary second degree is now a bookable offense. I was like, we have to get that on there. You've got auto theft warrants. Like, warrants are basically completely off the table. So the amount of warrants that are just running around in Thurston County right now, we stop them on traffic stops if they pull over. And they're like, I already know my warrant's not bookable, so why are you stopping me, kind of thing.
Brazen. It's absolutely brazen.
And you're just like, and this is an auto theft warrant.
Yeah.
And the guy's got a car that's got no plates on it, and the VIN isn't coming back stolen yet, right? And you're just like, this is crazy. It's crazy. I remember when I was during COVID, I interrupted and located a burglary on a power station, a PSE substation. And we identified him and let him go. And then the same night, he burglarized a second one. And you're like, what are we doing? And so that's where we're currently at now. The state has come down and said that on April 2nd, they're dropping the mask thing for congregate care facilities, which is what our jail falls under. So I have a conversation with Dr. A. But one of the things that we're looking at doing now, at least for the misdemeanor crimes, because those all have bail, is we're trying to do an administrative booking thing for the deputies, where they would basically find someone who's committed misdemeanor crimes that needs to go to jail, that historically we've just moved along, and actually take them to the jail, send them through the booking. They'll write a referral, and the jail will fingerprint and photograph that person and then kick them out the door. So at least we're removing them from that problem, and we're also getting them fingerprinted so that those arrests and those bookings show up on a III. Because someone in Thurston County might be contacted 15 times for disorderly conduct and property damage and theft. We're not booking them. We're just referring them. And then they come up to Snohomish County, and one of your deputies might run that person, and then they're looking at the III, and it shows they've got no arrests, no law enforcement contacts, and they've been an upstanding citizen. We're like, not quite. We've contacted them 15 times, so your theft is 16. That's the kind of stuff that needs to be documented. So we're working on that process. It's almost done, actually. So we're just trying to make some progress here, so that even if the jail continues to go down its path of restrictiveness, that we have an alternative option. So
Yeah, jails get complicated really quick.
They do.
Especially when you throw in a pandemic.
and there's liability in it, right? Like I don't want
Every day.
anyone to die of COVID in my jail at the same time. So it's not like I'm just disregarding the fact that there was a pandemic and whatnot. So
No, I think we've handled it fairly well considering all the circumstances the last 3 years.
yeah, I mean, as best you can, right? Like it was a huge obstacle to overcome.
Yeah, and you mentioned that burglary case with the PSE substation or whatever it was. The impacts, like, was that your case that you handled? Okay, so I got to relate to the community how impactful that is, because you get into this profession, you want to help people, you want to do what's right, you want to treat people right. That's always been super important to me.
Right.
But when you catch a burglary suspect, it's like there should be some accountability with that.
Right.
And when there's not, and you do catch that person, and then you have to say, well, I don't have a jail to take you to. We're going to have to let you go.
Yeah.
That's potential like career impacting stuff, in my opinion.
I agree.
It is.
Yeah. Well, and not long after that, I applied with Pierce County.
Oh,
because I'm just
interesting.
like,
I
I'm
didn't know
done.
that.
I'm done. Yeah, I actually applied, got all the way to basically a conditional offer, and then pulled out because it's hard to lateral, right? You're like, oh, my friends are here, I live here. But the other struggle that we're working with is all of the cities in our area contract with the Nisqually Tribal Jail.
Oh.
And Nisqually Tribal Jail is a sovereign entity, and they're like, we're open. So on top of the pay discrepancy that I have with my deputies in the cities, you can go to Lacey where there's better staffing. They get paid about now they get paid about $2,000 more a month, which, I mean, that's a decent amount of, like, that's a second house if you're really looking at it, right?
Yeah.
And they can take people to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, like, where do I compete with this? We have a
Yeah.
take-home car. Got good benefits, right? I got a great culture for you,
Yeah.
right? I
Boy,
want you to work for me.
We are having the same conversations,
Yeah.
man.
So-
So let's dive into that a little bit about the whole recruitment and retention issues. I think everybody's faced it, no matter what jurisdiction you might be in. We're still facing it up here. And for sheriff's office, it's a little bit unique. Is we're over 800 employees, but our largest bureau is corrections. So corrections deputies, civilian staff. People don't realize we hire medical professionals. We have a full-time physician that works in our jail. First time we've been able to hire one. But it's tough because typically when you work for county government, you're not going to make as much as you can go out in the private sector, especially in like the medical profession,
I can't
and so
imagine.
it is very hard. And then you throw in, the police work. And I think you mentioned when we were talking before, cities just generally in the state of Washington tend to make quite a bit more money than a deputy sheriff. We can try to sell our culture all day long, but that only goes so far when you try to feed a family and raise a family in expensive Western Washington. What's some things you guys are doing in Thurston County for recruitment and retention, and how are you doing with staffing?
Well, and just to touch on that too, like, you guys are right here with Everett.
Yeah.
And Everett's a shining example. Like, police work in this state, since the laws have changed, has turned into almost like a mercenary type work. Like, who can offer, it's a bidding war. Who can offer the fattest signing bonus with, the moving bonus and the biggest, most inflated salary possible in the county? Like, we're falling behind bad. And we go into contract negotiations, right? Lacey just got 10% for the fourth straight year. So they're at 40% over 4 years, somewhere in there.
Wow.
We get, they offer, they're like 1.9. You're like, what are we supposed to do with this, right? Inflation's like 8%, so -6, thank you. But there's a finite amount of money. So for me, some of the things that I'm trying to do is just, I'm trying to set ourselves apart in ways that aren't necessarily just financial. So at the jail, right, like allowing them to have load-bearing vests that are more comfortable, allowing them to wear drop-leg holsters and have tennis shoes instead of boots. So we're trying to change some of the uniform stuff at the jail. We're also trying to get a narcotics dog potentially assigned to the corrections side instead of patrol, because historically all the cool stuff goes to patrol. And then what we have is we have an internal transfer. So if you get hired as a corrections deputy, you don't have to retest. Once you're off of probation, basically, you can just do an internal transfer and come over as a civil service position. And as long as you have to do like a physical test so that we rank you, but you do another background and you're in. So really trying to find, can we get the dive team? Can we get some corrections deputies on the dive team? Can we get some corrections deputies as to be crisis negotiators who go out with the SWAT team? But then they can also utilize that skill in the jail when you got someone holed up in a cell that is totally having a mental crisis. So we've done some of that stuff. And then on the patrol side, we're trying to do like a build your patrol car program, where instead of just assigning people generic cars, we'll offer them either an Explorer or a Tahoe, and then go down, and they can, within the budget, they can configure their own cars from the county shops. You know, do you want a better light package, or would you prefer to have an in-car radar, or whatever it is? So allowing deputies to have more control over and really build their car to be the kind of deputy that they want to be on the road. So that's something that we're looking at doing. But you know, a lot of it comes down to that's still going to cost money, and so you got to go to county commissioners and have that conversation. But a lot of it has been just going to these meetings, you know, support services and negotiations, and hearing their complaints. And you know, for us, like if it's financially possible, it's moral and ethical, and it benefits both the public and the employees, the answer is generally yes. And that's what they found. Like they come to it, and I'm like, yes, do it.
But that's not the norm, though. What I have found through my experience in Snohomish County. Like that is the exception to the rule, where you're a new sheriff, you come in and you're like, that makes no sense. Can we change that?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. Well, why'd you ever say no in the first place?
Right.
And things like load bearing vest, changing boots. We've kind of done some of that same stuff.
Yeah.
We did beards, which I'm like, why not? As long as you look professional. I care more about how people treat people out on the road.
Correct.
Than anything else, right? If someone wants to wear a beard in police work, so be it. But that's not a popular opinion in some circles.
Yeah, some circles, but I don't. You know, a lot of the people that complain about beards and load-bearing vests and uniforms, they were never going to like me to begin with. Okay. So, you know, it's tough to say, but these are the same people that, you know, they call and they're like, your deputy's going 1 mile and over the speed limit. And you're like, okay, you know, your deputy wrote me a ticket, you know. Okay, well, how fast were you going? Well, I was going 70 and a 40, but like, where's the break? You know? And so there's a lot of people that are just, they're going to be negative, and we see it anyways. But what I'm really trying to focus on are the people that need our help. And the majority of society, I think, does appreciate what we do, so long as we're doing what we should be doing. And, you know, really, like, my opinion is that deputies could show up in pink Barney suits. As long as they're handling the problems, people genuinely don't really care. Yeah. Like, they want their problems solved. Like, they might, like, eye you for a second and be like, that's kind of goofy. But anyways, I got a trespasser on my property. Can you, like, I'm going to videotape this if Barney tackles him, right? Yeah. Like, they just want their problem solved. And so that's been my big focus is how can I give our deputies tools that are going to solve people's problems? And so, you know, revamping our training has been a big thing too. Like, we have overlap. We have the opportunity to train patrol 26 times a year with 13 overlaps for each training. And last year we trained twice. And it's not a financial thing. Like, we have a training budget. You know, it's not an overtime issue. Like, we just weren't training. So we're going on JBLM property now to do active shooter training. We're doing all sorts of stuff, and we're really also trying to expand the training beyond like the traditional disciplines. I'm trying to get a professor from like South Puget Sound Community College to give a 2-hour block on improving report writing. It's huge. Just things like that. We've really been doing a lot with mental health as well. So we've got a peer support person, like a fully embedded peer support person. And she's actually she's a civilian on our crisis negotiation team. So she can go out on SWAT call-outs and stuff and like negotiate and really try to reach people. So that's been, and kind of the transition, that's also been another thing that we talk about with the retention. And I think right now everyone is experiencing problems getting corrections and commissioned deputies. Like, that's not unique to anyone. So my position coming in has been to look at our department across the board and really find inefficiencies where we have either commissioned deputies or commissioned detectives doing work that a civilian could do. Because there's a huge price tag and there's a huge training tag that goes along with a badge and a gun. And there's a lot of work that we're doing. Like, for instance, we're one of the only ones that I know of still in our area that have commissioned detectives doing evidence work. And when I ask why, there's not really, I mean, do you guys do traffic stops? Are you guys making arrests? I mean, what about this job? And so one of the things that I'm proposing to the county commissioners is to fund an evidence technician that is a civilian position. And my plan then is to embed that into the detective division. We've got 2 of them. A detective and a civilian will work alongside each other for the next 2 years until we get a second one to replace that one. And that detective will get bumped back into our general detectives and be a full-time missing person cold case detective, because no one's working those cases right now. When you have no detectives to work cases, or they're completely stacked, the ones that go first are the ones that are cold cases and missing persons, unfortunately. Yeah. And it has to get addressed. So,
yeah, that's interesting. We had a similar, I was asked in 2020 in front of the council here. and almost the exact same thing. Do you need a badge and a gun to go to everything that you go to? And I had to think about it for a second before I answered, because I'm like the super pro cop, pro law enforcement, pro public safety.
Yes.
But I had to give them an honest answer. I'm like, no, we don't.
Correct.
And so the year after that, we did a little bit different. And I want to be careful with labor here because they watch this stuff really close.
Yeah.
But we did crime prevention officers, which they're not doing deputy sheriff work, but they are doing some work that can really just kind of make their lives a little bit easier. And the feedback from the community and the business owners has just been outstanding. I can't send a deputy sheriff with a badge and a gun to all these businesses to talk about crime prevention. There is no way we can do that in Snohomish County.
Nope.
Like, it's a flat no. But these crime prevention officers do.
That's awesome.
And we only got 3 of them for a large county, and they're several months in, but they're overworked. But I think we as sheriffs, we've got to be looking at unique solutions to some of this
100%.
stuff. And the answer is still no. 3 years later, you don't need a badge and a gun to go to everything that we do.
Correct.
It creates some uncomfortable conversations for us sometimes, right? But it's just how it is.
I mean, you just look at it, and like another thing we're doing, right, is the academy back updates, right?
Goodness,
like
here we go.
It takes a long time to get people into the academy, and when I walk through the offices, we've got deputy recruits who haven't been in the academy that are reading policy. I'm like, what a waste! What a waste of time. So now we're giving them a week of training, and they're our CSOs now. So they go out and they get a little bit of DT training, they get some driving training, they get some procedural training, and we're shipping them out to go do transports for our deputies to and from the jail. Like, that's just wasted, inefficient time for them to just sit and read. They're going to read that policy, and they're going to go to the academy and forget everything they read, because now they're learning everything about the job, right?
Man, yeah.
And
It's
so
overwhelming.
that's a waste of time. That's for them and their FTO when they get out. In the beginning, though, like, especially we have jail transfers coming over waiting for academy. Like, talk about a perfect candidate to go do transports for the deputies, is someone who's in the jail who did transports, right? So that's what we're doing with them, and we're really just trying to tighten down on the inefficiencies of, do we have people just sitting around doing nothing? Because we're all overworked.
Yeah.
Like, the staffing levels aren't there, so how can we reduce that workload and spread it more evenly amongst current employees?
Everybody's at capacity right now.
Yeah.
Everybody is. Yeah. We have those same conversations. We're not quite as far along as you. We haven't been able to pull that off yet.
Yeah.
But it's hard because the backup with the academy, right? And the academy's 5 months now, I think. And so, and we do a pre and post academy. We
Right.
just feel like we have to
We
in
do
this
too.
day and age.
We do too.
I wish the answer was no. And I wish as the sheriff, I could just say, no, we need them on this, but we have to. We have
Right.
to train our people right. But the academy stuff, it's real right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a several month backup. Well, every now and then we'll get lucky and a spot will
They'll
come
bump up.
open. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's okay. We do that. But it is what I have found just over a year between when we hire and when that person is actually able to be in a patrol call by themselves on the street.
12 months to 18 months sometimes, anywhere in there, at a minimum.
Yeah, but you throw in the recruitment and retention stuff from the last 3 years. We can't make that up overnight.
You can't make it up.
It's not quick.
You can't make it up. I mean, in January for us, the first month I'm in office, I get the report that 35 out of 59 patrol deputies work 1,200 hours of overtime.
Holy
And I'm like,
smokes.
not sustainable.
Not sustainable at
So
all.
I got with the guild and I said, listen, for the deputies, as long as their training is up to date and their calls are handled, they get 1 hour of on-duty workout time or schoolwork time. Because when I was a deputy, working those 16-hour shifts, like, physical fitness is important to me. I need to be able to jump over a fence and go help someone or chase someone. And I'm like, when am I supposed to get a workout in? I just worked 5 16-hour shifts in a row. I just spent 5 days sitting in my patrol car, vegging out on Red Bull and chips, right? Like, when am I supposed to actually go get a workout in? So I got with them, and that's almost done now too. So, and we're trying to get it for corrections, a little more challenging. They don't have a gym in their facility, but we're trying to find things to improve that work-life balance, because the same thing that's hurting you, which is the staffing, is also causing the employees that do stay to have increased burnout because they're working longer hours, they're getting less time off. And then, the agencies that are doing better, right, some of the cities, they continue to benefit and just continue to benefit, right? Like, these deputies are eyeing a huge pay increase, and they're eyeing, well, I can get a day off, and my backup's closer.
It's hard. Yeah, the arguments are real. It's funny you mentioned, I didn't know you did the workout on duty thing. For 2 years, I was really important to me. I really wanted to bring that to the sheriff's office. My whole thing was, I've watched for decades firefighters be able to do that all the time. Why can't the
Why
police,
can't we?
right?
Why can't
and
we?
I mean, you're not going to get to do it every day. There's some
You're
days
not.
that are just too busy.
Correct.
And so finally, the undersheriff in December of 22, I came to command staff. I said, this has been on my desk for 2 years. I want this to happen. And it was always like, it's just not time, too much going on. Yeah. And I respected the opinion of command staff. Finally, the undersheriff is just announced it in January at supervisor training. And the consensus with command staff is we can't let perfection stand in the way of progress. There's always going to be questions.
Yep.
It's like, well, this work group gets to it and then
100%.
this other one doesn't. So I stole one of your video messages that you've been doing. The public one, that was awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
And I just laid it out. I go, this is what we're doing. It's effective this day. Yeah. It's not perfect, but man, we're moving forward. And so we're still working through some bumps in that, but we did that
You
too.
have to. Yeah. And most employees, or at least when I was in office when I was a deputy before I got in office, like when I looked up, as long as I saw like an attempt, I was okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're trying to make this better, right? It's not perfect, but they're trying. It was when I felt that there was no action and we'd given up that's when people start leaving. That's when people start seeking better leadership, better paying jobs and stuff like that. So for me, right, like it's not perfect. And I understand that like they're not going to be able, like some bureaus aren't going to be able to have that opportunity. And each bureau kind of has its own unique advantages and disadvantages, but we just had to do something. Like if we just accept that deputy burnout is okay, then they're going to burn out and leave. Yeah. So we had to try and do something. And for me, that was 1 hour of on-duty workout or schoolwork time. And, why wouldn't the public want a fit, educated police force?
Yeah, I think it benefits everybody.
It does. It benefits everyone. And it's not costing us anything, right? It's an hour of downtime for them to go, right? Like, I think they also want deputies who are mentally fit, right? Because exercise, endorphins, all those things come together. So it was a no-brainer for us. Yeah. Just trying, and we're not done. We're continuing to try and find work-life balance things that we can improve because the pay just isn't there. So if the pay is not there, then what else is there? Because the last thing that I'll ever do is come to someone and be like, "There's just nothing we can do." Yeah. I can't accept that answer.
Yeah. Good.
Under any circumstances.
Good. So we hadn't had a chance to really talk about this, but you mentioned fentanyl when we were talking just a little bit ago. What are you seeing down in Thurston County? We're really trying hard up here in Snohomish County. The overdoses are just tragic. They're just tragic. It seems to be never ending. Yeah. It's different. Like I grew up in the meth craze, in the 2000s and things like that. And then it kind of switched to heroin. Yep. That was bad. Never seen anything like fentanyl. What are you seeing down there? And what do you think from your experience? It grabs you. It's much more serious. We're seeing like multiple Narcan doses to bring people back from fentanyl. It's so strong. What are you guys experiencing?
So with heroin, it was interesting. As a deputy, I had, I think, 10 revives on heroin. Yep. I Narcan 10 people. They all came back. Yep. With fentanyl, 50-50. Wow. Maybe 50-50. And the people that are surviving, we're Narcanning 5 to 10 times to try and bring them back. And, half of them are ending up on a ventilator anyways. In Thurston County, fentanyl was a leading cause of death last year. 153 overdoses that are all basically traced back to fentanyl. We're seeing overdoses in our jail. Long before we had any deaths, I was asking to try and get a narcotics dog on board. And the next thing you know, we get hit with two fentanyl deaths in our jail that are being investigated. We immediately step back and we wanted an independent investigation. Yeah. So we've got 2 for each overdose. We have 2 different agencies so that we're all coming to the same non-biased, conflict of interest free answer, right? Of how's it getting in the jail and how can we prevent it? The problem that we're seeing with the fentanyl is just how little it takes to kill someone. Back in the day, right, we have a big old body scanner, at the jail. And, back in the day, in order for someone to get a lethal dose of heroin into the jail, you'd be looking for a golf ball.
Yeah, you're going to see it, yeah. Right?
You're like, what is that? Now you're looking for a piece of rice. And what does that show up in an x-ray, in a body scanner? Nothing. And so it's a challenge that what concerns me the most, right, is like, in my opinion, I've surrounded myself with like true experts in all their fields, from corrections to support to patrol and everything in between. And when you get a lot of really smart people together and they're scratching their heads, that's where you're like, that's not good, right? Because most of the time we're like, oh, we can solve that. We'll do this. We'll move this around. When people start scratching their heads, and that's where we are with fentanyl, it's so deadly, it's so potent, and it's so small, and it's killing everyone. And the mentality, I think, is what we're struggling with. Like at the jail, for instance, right? Comments made by the inmates are they'll see someone overdose and essentially die, and they'll be like, I want whatever he's got.
Jeez.
And you're like, how do you combat that, right? Yeah. Like there's a mentality there of like they want to chase that dragon all the way to the edge and then be revived back because that's the best high. And you're like, this Narcan stuff, it's not working, man. Like, it's not heroin. This isn't heroin where you can ride it all the way to the end and we'll bring you back every time. And so that's kind of the tough thing that we're dealing with is a mentality of like, that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're dying. What do you mean that's the good stuff? And so we're trying to work with like our opioid task force to get a campaign out there about the ineffectiveness of Narcan on fentanyl.
Wow.
We're trying to do that because I think that there's a misconception amongst drug users maybe a little bit that like, well, just Narcan. We went into you've gone into plenty of drug houses. Most of the drug houses that we served raids on or whatever, they had Narcan stations in them.
Wow.
Right? So you'd have two little recliners with all the drug paraphernalia, and in between you had like a little Narcan dispenser. In most of the drug houses I went into, and it's not working anymore. Like they're just Narcan and not bringing these people back. Yeah. So the fentanyl thing, it's just so much more than Snohomish or Thurston County, right? Yep. And it's more than the state of Washington. It's truly a federal. Nationwide. It's a federal issue about how it's getting in because it's not internally manufactured in our country. So
that's right.
That's a bigger conversation, but we're still doing everything we can. One thing that we've also done is our narcotics detectives, which that's a whole other issue, right? Fentanyl is leading cause of death. Thurston County has a narcotics task force. We're the only ones on it. All the cities backed out.
Staffing again. Yeah.
So we're the only ones contributing right now. Now, granted, Olympia has started donating a detective part-time, which is great, but we spend most of our time in the cities. We spend most of our time in the cities battling fentanyl dealers because they don't deal with users. They're going after big seizures, but we don't have the staffing to actually deal with that stuff. So that's another issue, but you're talking with them, and one of the things that they're doing is they've actually created a checklist for patrol. And almost like almost like a threat assessment, they're going through the checklist, and if it totals out, then the narcotics detective will actually be mandatorily called out, and they'll do a controlled substance homicide case on the overdose.
Oh, interesting.
So we started to build that because we're like the only thing we can think to do now is try to tie the dealers to the overdoses and go after them for the specific homicides. And the thought process is if you can get enough dealers in jail for not just dealing, because they don't really care about that, if you can get them in for a homicide, maybe we change the atmosphere around dealing fentanyl.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Different note, kind of as we start to wrap up here, but I want to talk about something positive. In my opinion, and sometimes that's hard in our profession. I always try to be an optimist in everything.
Yeah, right.
I try to. But I think things are looking up as far as most of the stuff we talked about. We got a long ways to go with fentanyl, but recruitment and retention, I hope is looking up in the state of Washington. From my initial observations of the first couple months, I think we're getting there. We've got a long ways to go in Snohomish County. And like we talked about with the delays in the academy and how long it takes to train a police officer, deputy sheriff in these days, it's going to be the long term for certain. But one thing we've enjoyed in Snohomish County, you probably do in Thurston County too, is that people are generally very supportive of the police up here. Yeah. And that really has kind of kept us all going up here for the last 3 years. But kind of what do you see the future? I know they're in session right now, and we're not quite sure what they're going to come up with because they're battling two huge things that impact us daily, pursuits and drugs. Yeah. What are they going to do in the state of Washington? I hope they make some clear-headed decisions down there. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But what do you think? Are things looking up down there in Thurston County, or what's your take on that?
I think so. Most of the issues coming back to our department can all be related back to staffing, right?
Okay.
I mean, I've got 35 out of 59 patrol deputies. I've got 70 out of 91 corrections deputies, and we want to do more. We want to do all these cool things, and I'm like, emergencies first. So the staffing thing has been kind of interesting. So when I got elected, we had one recruiter for the entire department. She was in corrections, so we added a patrol recruiter to work alongside them. We've wrapped their vehicles in like military appreciation support. We added QR codes to the cars so people can drive by and scan it, and it takes them to an application. We're doing all these different things. We went from one background investigator to 4, so we had a bottleneck with backgrounds. And so as a result now, we're down to 1 patrol vacancy, I believe, as of yesterday. So those aren't bodies actually helping patrol. So it's not the actual number that I count. I count the 35 out of 59 or 37 now. But we are down to 1 patrol vacancy. Now we got to get them off to the academy. We have a lot of people coming out on FTO right now. So when you look at the form for us, you can project out and see like things are going to progressively get better. Yeah. The big thing for me hasn't been so much recruiting. It's been retention. You can hire as many people as you want. If you hire 1 and 3 go out the back door, you've done nothing to improve the quality of life for your employees. So I just think that the legislative session has given people hope. I think that there's been, a third of the sheriffs got rotated out this last election. Yeah. So you have a lot of new blood in these sheriff's offices, leading the offices, and I think that that's probably going to improve things, right? Like, just after a while, things get stale and they get shifted around and people get excited. I get a lot of messages on my social media. They're like, I'm applying, right? Like, I'm excited. I love what you're doing. I love following along. And I think a big thing for me that kind of projects out the success of Thurston County is transparency from our department. We have done a complete 180 when it comes to transparency. That was one of the issues that I ran on. I felt like our sheriff's office covered a lot of things up, and it was a no bad press ever kind of thing. And that's just not life. And I think people look at that as a fake sheriff's office, right? When the only thing that ever comes out is the good stuff. You're like, really? It's all roses? I don't think so. Police work's dirty. And it just is. It's a dirty job. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of carnage. There's a lot of mental and physical stress. There's all these different things, and we try to make it positive. But there's just a lot of negativity with it. And so one of the things that I've really focused on is just sharing all of it. Yeah. And people love it and they hate it at the same time, right? They like it, and they're also like, too much information. And I'm like, well, but that's part of it. If you want to come on the journey, right, you can close your eyes, but you're probably still going to hear about it. And so I think that's been a big thing for us is disclosing employee misconduct, disclosing the bad stuff, the fentanyl overdoses in the jail, all these different things that are going on that aren't good. They're just not good. They don't make our office look good, but in a roundabout way, at least we're being honest about it and open and like, hey, like, and we don't just disclose bad news. We disclose bad news with what we're going to change, what we're going to try differently. And you know what? In 2 months, we might come back and say that didn't work either.
You got to be willing to try, though.
We have to try. And then we also have the good stuff, right? And so there's a
absolutely.
mixture there.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of a compliment here because I agree with everything you just said is spot on. And again, such similar conversations between the two agencies. And I think people are craving transparency, both the good and the bad. And I think we're obligated to do it as elected officials. But I think there's something else that people are craving, whether it's a police executive and they're an appointed police chief or an elected sheriff, is they want authentic people. Are you being real? Are you being truthful with me, right? Yeah. And I watch all your social media stuff, man. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you. And if anything I can say about you, you are definitely authentic.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, and I'm outspoken, right? And I felt like we had a quiet sheriff, and I didn't like that, right? Like, things are really bad, and they continue to get worse. Look at all this legislation. Why are we being quiet about this? Like, there's a narrative being spun about us that is simply not true, and it's been going on for a really long time, a better part of a decade now. And it's up to us to do one of two things: agree with the narrative and make the changes, or tell them why it's wrong. Those are the only two options. And so, like, for instance, and I'll kind of end on this, House Bill 1513 came around, and that was the one that said police officers won't do traffic stops for equipment violations. You won't do traffic stops for suspended drivers who haven't paid their fines, and you won't do traffic stops for misdemeanor warrants that aren't DUI or DV. Oh, and by the way, when you do a traffic stop, you need to sound like a goofball and get on the radio and say, radio, I'm pulling a car over for going 55 and a 30 every single time you do a traffic stop, as if we don't have enough radio traffic clogging up our stuff already. So I made a post about that, and I didn't just post that it's a bad bill or anything like that, because that's not really my role as the sheriff. My role as the sheriff is to explain to people what potentially could happen and give them examples that they can relate to. Hey, the first section of this is what we won't do anymore. The second section, we won't do this anymore. The third section for warrants, here's a list of some warrants that we will no longer pull people over for. That reached 100,000 people. Yeah. And about 25,000 of them showed they engaged with the post, and they either shared it, liked it, or made a comment, or they followed the link and actually made a comment on the bill. That bill's dead now. That's half the battle, right? I feel like I kind of had some play in like killing that bill. Yeah. And it was a bill that needed to die. However, there's a second element of that I think is also my duty. There are two parts of that bill that I completely agree with. One of them was that they did not want, and I've always agreed with this, they did not want police officers asking for consent to search when there was no reasonable suspicion of a crime. So they didn't want police officers to stop someone for speeding and immediately go, hey, reason I stopped you for speeding, can I search your car? Mm-hmm. It's just kind of a weird thing, right? Like, if you're not asking to search for some sort of articulable reason, Well, a lot of people aren't going to tell the police no. They don't feel comfortable doing that. So
Sure, yeah.
you just had, and I saw it sometimes, and I never liked that. So we're getting ready to make a procedural change that says unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause of a crime or a Community Caretaking Act issue, you won't be allowed to just ask for permission to search. Yeah. The deputies don't really care because they're like, we don't do that. But it's still a procedure that we can show that we're making a change. There are parts of that bill that we agree with. We'll make the change on our own. You don't need to legislate this. Yeah. And the second part of it was that they were going to try to make a grant for people who couldn't afford to maybe replace the headlight on their bill, right? Like some impoverished funding. So the next thing we're doing is once we get our foundation up and running, we're going to hand out $5 AutoZone gift cards to people who appear like they may not be able to afford to replace the tail light or the brake light or whatever, so that they can go get that stuff done. Because the goal isn't to impoverish people further. No, it's not to hammer people into the ground with tickets. The goal is public safety. Your brake light needs to be fixed so that people don't crash into you. So those are some things where, like, from my perspective, it's holistic, right? It's not just about killing the bill and so that we can continue to do our jobs. It's also about how do we actually improve this from the top down and take the things that we do like from those bills and show the legislator and olive branch that says, good work on this. We still have a lot of issues over here we're not comfortable with, but there's some good things in there that we're going to do.
Yeah, got to do both.
Got to do both.
Yeah. Man, we'll end on that. That was awesome. Good way to wrap things up. Yeah. So, Sheriff Sanders, thank you so much for coming up here to Snohomish County. Yeah. We appreciate it. How do people follow you on social media if they want to? Facebook, right? Sheriff Sanders is, okay.
Just follow Sheriff Sanders or the Thurston County Sheriff page. We're kind of intertwined. What I do is the Thurston County Sheriff page is more of our official stuff. And on the Sheriff Sanders page, I go into more detail about things, right? So we'll share a policy change, and then on my page, I'll go into detail and go back and forth with people and give them a Q&A kind of. So.
Okay. I'm watching your social media.
I'm watching you too.
I love what you're doing down there. Keep it up. Anything that the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office can ever do to help Thurston County Sheriff, you just let us know and we'll be there.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much, Adam. Yeah.